It is the year 250 BC. In the Indian subcontinent, an empire reached its zenith. The Maurya Empire was a geographically extensive Iron Age historical power based in Magadha and founded by Chandragupta Maurya, which dominated ancient India between 321 BC and 187 BC. Comprising the majority of South Asia, the Maurya Empire was centralized by conquering the Indo-Gangetic Plain in the eastern extent of the empire and had its capital city at Pataliputra. The empire was the largest to have ever existed in the Indian subcontinent, expanding more than 5 million square kilometers. Chandragupta Maurya was the founder of the Mauryan Empire in ancient Magadha in modern-day Bihar, which is a state of India. He conquered the Nanda Empire and the eastern provinces of Seleucid Empire. He managed to establish the largest empire that would ever exist in the Indian subcontinent. Chandragupta Maurya raised an army and overthrew the Nanda Empire in 322 BC. Then he rapidly expanded his power westwards across central and western India by conquering the satraps, former provinces left by Alexander the Great, who created the Macedonian Empire at its huge dimensions. He died at a young age in 323 BC. His death will crumble his empire, which will become weak and hopeless in the face of its enemies and rivals. Alexander's death was the principal factor of the collapse of his empire, which was separated in 4 weaker pieces. By 317 BC, the Mauryan Empire had fully occupied northwestern India, then defeated Seleucus I, the commander and founder of the Seleucid Empire, during the Seleucid-Mauryan War, thus gained additional territory west of the Indus River. Under Chandragupta Maurya and his successors, internal and external trade, agriculture, and economic activities all thrived and expanded across India thanks to the creation of a single and efficient system of finance, administration, and security. After the Kalinga War, the empire experienced nearly a half a century of peace and security. Modern India also enjoyed an era of social harmony, religious transformation, and expansion of the science and knowledge. The population of the empire was at that time around 60 million people, making the Maurya one of the most populated empires of antiquity. The power of a state, even if we are speaking about an empire from 2000 years ago or a present-day country, stays in its dimensions and manpower. Having a greater dimensions or population, there are more chances that your economy will be bigger. You can afford a large military, so your kingdom, empire or country has more chances to be more powerful. As in the jungle rule, the small is eaten by the big one. Of course, through our history, many times small armies faced bigger ones. Smaller kingdoms faced larger empires. And there were times when against the odds, the small won. Even if the big guys were defeated, they had the resources to recover faster. A large structure is hard to be defeated. Mauryan Empire was a true power in antiquity. As always, our question is: it seems like there is a pattern. In our history, no matter how big the political empire was, sooner or later, the downfall was imminent. Whether we're speaking about the Persian, Indian, Macedonian, or Roman empires, everyone in history collapsed for some obvious causes. The Mauryan Empire had many rulers. For now, I just presented the first one. Another important figure was Ashoka. Ashoka was a brilliant commander who crushed revolts in his empire. He managed to win wars against its enemies, reasserting the empire's superiority in southern and western India. In his conquest of Kalinga, hundreds of thousands of people were affected by the destructions and what followed after the war. Many of them died. It was a massacre, a very bloody war. When he personally saw the devastation, Ashoka began feeling remorse and guilty After the annexation of Kalinga was completed, Ashoka embraced the teaching of Buddhism, and it's believed that he renounced violence and wars. I've shown you before signs of Buddhism in the empire, even if in the territory were many religions and cultures. The religious harmony started to exist after the next event. Ashoka sent out missionaries to travel around South Asia and then further to spread Buddhism. Then he expanded friendly relations with other states. Many years of peace and prosperity made this guy one of the most successful and famous monarchs in the Indian history. But this rule was the zenith of its empire, and after his death, the fall started. It's believed that the weak successors of Ashoka are responsible for the collapse of this mighty empire. The next 50 years were followed by a succession of weaker kings. There are many sources in Indian history, and it's not known for sure who succeeded to the throne after Ashoka. Hindu, Buddhists and Jaina give confusing accounts of these rulers. It seems that Ashoka had a blind son, and his grandson Dasharatha succeeded. It's commonly held to have succeeded him as the imperial ruler of India. Dasharatha ruled over a declining political empire. He is not known as a great leader. Several territories of the empire broke away from central rule during his reign. After the death of this guy, the empire died too 50 years later. In those years, 6 or 7 men ruled it. If we are doing a simple calculation dividing 50 years by 6, in average everyone could have ruled around 8 years in this empire, which is a very small rule for a monarch. Having so many emperors in such a small period of time is showing us that the instability and no leadership was present in that empire. A big empire should be ruled by strong emperors and strong administration. It wasn't for anybody to rule such a colossus. The Mauryan Empire expanded pretty quickly in every direction they could. The strong leadership managed to maintain this empire united and strong. But in those 60 million people were many nationalities, religions and cultures. It seems this is a problem in every big empire of antiquity. The vastness of an empire could mean power or its own graveyard. From the days of Chandragupta, the Maurya administration was strong enough to control the distant provinces. It was also necessary for the provincial governments to enjoy and to have enough power. When the center declined and its authority became weak, the provinces assumed independent character. It is believed that after Ashoka's death, some various Maurya provinces broke away from the central administration. From the days of Alexander's invasion, the northwestern frontier of India remained exposed to the Greeks. Some unsuccessful attempts of King Antiochus the Great to conquer the Indian lands. It's believed that he had crossed to Indian territories. After that, references are available to further Greek invasions. It is known that the Greeks entered deep into Indian territories, and it's showing us that the Mauryans were not longer capable to defend themselves. When the Maurya rule was thus weakening, and the empire was breaking up within the half-century after Ashoka's death, then finally came a death blow to it by an internal revolt. The revolt was led by chief of the Maurya army, the general Pushyamitra, in about 185 BC, when the Maurya king Brihadratha ruled. It is described in history that the general organized a parade of the army to which he invited the king to witness. By doing this, it was created a very good occasion to kill him, having the support of the army. The killing of Mauryan emperor brought the end for this big empire. But why did this happen? It was like a coup, a revolt of a general backed by the army. And this was a result of the bad administration that followed after Ashoka's death. In those times, empires were led by dynasties. The first great Indian empire gave to the country a glorious period, and it collapsed forever. But it lived from that time in books and in the history of Indian culture, and remained as a symbol for today's India. More than 2000 years passed, but we can see symbols from that time in today's Indian administration. Symbols like Ashoka Chakra here on the Indian flag, and the national emblem of India, the land capital of Ashoka, a sculpture from that